This episode is sponsored by the Hollywood Casino at Charlestown Races in West Virginia. Looking for New Year's Eve plans? Don't miss Hollywood Casino's pre-New Year's Eve party with Purple Experience in the Event Center on Saturday, December 29th. Receive 2 complimentary drinks with each ticket purchased. Details and tickets at HollywoodCasinoCharlestown.com. Must be 21 to enter the casino floor and attend a show. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Welcome to the newest episode of Beyond the Fame with Jason Fraley. I'm your host, Jason Fraley, picking the brains of the top filmmakers, musicians, and artists of our time. The 80s rock band Winger rocks the Tally Ho Theater in Leesburg, Virginia on Friday night. I spoke to lead singer Kip Winger about the band's biggest hits from Miles Away to Headed for a Heartbreak. Hey, Kip Winger of Winger. Hey, thanks so much for joining us on the show today.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
We're talking because your band Winger is coming to the Tally Ho Theater in Leesburg, Virginia this Friday night. Have you played the Tally Ho before? Can you remember? I mean, I'm sure that all runs together as you tour the country, but do you remember this actual venue?
Yes, yeah, very well, actually. It's a great place to play, and we've had a lot of luck playing there, and the fans are great.
Awesome. And in terms of like set list wise, we don't have to spoil the whole thing, but I assume we'll hear all the greatest hits from over the years, but do you also mix in anything new, like maybe from last year's album 7 or anything even that you're working on coming up?
Yeah, we do all the hits, and we do some stuff from 7, and we try to do a song or two off every record, although we haven't done anything on Winger 4 in a while. But yeah, we do a wide variety of stuff from our 9 studio records.
Nice. Well, we're excited to come out and see at the Tally Ho. And Leesburg's just a cool little town. If I don't know if you ever have a chance to walk around it, a historic town. It's a cool spot. Everybody, we invite you to check out, make a day of it, grab dinner, go see the show. You can't beat it. Well, whenever I have someone on, I like to tease the show, but I always like to remind folks some, a bit of your origin story, how you got into this racket to begin with. I know you were born in Denver, Colorado in '61. What'd you grow up listening to, as you were taking in the views of Pikes Peak, etc.? What were you rocking?
Oh God, I grew up in a band with my brothers in a band, so we were playing a lot of classic rock stuff, Led Zeppelin and Black Sabbath and Creedence and all that kind of 70s rock. I've played just about every one of those tunes, but also on the radio hits were what you would now listen to on Sirius XM yacht rock. I mean, that was all the hits that were on the radio when I was growing up, Alan Parsons and all that kind of stuff. So 70s, man, total 70s stuff, Grand Funk.
All the good stuff. It's hilarious to me that you mentioned Alan Parsons because I literally just interviewed him. Like when I post this, the previous episode will be Alan Parsons' project because they're coming to Baltimore at the Lyric. By the way, I'm kicking myself. I wish, because I talked to him for a long time about his career. I wish I would have asked him, quoted Austin Powers to him. Remember when Dr. Eva goes, the Alan Parsons project? Anyway. But didn't I read you sent like a demo tape to Alan Parsons? And you actually got a response?
I did. I sent him a letter when I was 16 with our demo, and he did respond. Very nice of him to do that, and made a few comments on our demo and stuff. And that was funny to give that to him when I joined his band in 2004.
That's cool. You got to play with him later. I mean, of course, my generation, I always associated with Michael Jordan running out to Sirius, but you got in way before that. You were a fan long before that. That's cool. Hey, so I know even before you formed Winger, then you wrote, I guess, Bang Bang for Kix's third album, and Kix has some local ties to this area, so I figured I'd mention that. But didn't you also play bass for some Alice Cooper albums? Like I'm trying to remind folks some of your cool stuff you did before Winger actually officially formed. Like remind me of the Kix and Alice Cooper connections.
Yeah, I mean, I was friends with Beau Hill, a very well-known record producer at the time, and he hired me to play bass on Alice Cooper. Before that, he had done Rat, and Rat became really big on their first album. And so he had gotten a lot of jobs producing rock bands, Kix being one of them. And he did the Midnight Dynamite record, which I think is actually not only Kix's best record, but I think it's Beau Hill's best record too.
Oh, there you go. High praise right there.
And they were looking for songs, and I had a riff with lyrics and stuff, but they just asked me if they could do the music, use the music, and rewrite the words and melody. And so, that was my first published track. It was great because that was such a cool record, and they're great guys, and we've remained friends, and all of that. When I went to do Alice, it was the same thing. Beau needed a bass player on the Constrictor album. I met Kane Roberts, and Kane Roberts was really the reason that I got into Alice. He was the one that mentioned to pitch myself for the tour if they go on tour. So that was a classic case of right place at the right time, being ready for it.
Oh yeah. Well, you got to be ready when the opportunity. It's when opportunity meets preparation, basically. So you were ready when your moment came, and that's not a bad way to cut your teeth in the early '80s, my friend, with Kix and Alice Cooper. That's the way to do it. All right. Well, then now I have to ask the question.
Made a lot of mistakes.
You made a lot of mistakes.
Yeah. There's a lot of other things I could have done that I didn't do. But
well, like what? I gotta ask that because there's the reason I ask these origin story questions. It's because there's other musicians out there, that are trying to, see how you got your break, or maybe like you're saying, avoid certain pitfalls. So, what are some things that others shouldn't do that you wish?
Well, off the top of my head, like staying in Alan Parsons, that was a great gig. It was very difficult to stay because of the timing of my personal career and the timing of the way they did gigs. So I backed out of it. But looking back on it, I would have liked to have stayed, not only because they're great people and awesome to work with, but the music's incredible. But well, you interviewed him. I mean, he's got a really interesting story.
Oh yeah, from the beat and assistant engineer on those Beatles albums and lead engineer on Dark Side of the Moon for Pink Floyd. Like he's got so much music history flowing at him. It's incredible. But we're here to talk Kip Winger, baby. So how did you actually? All right, so you're doing the stuff with Kix and Alice Cooper and all that stuff. How did you meet the Winger guys to actually form? I'm sure you've told that story many times, but we got to have it here for the Leesburg folks. How did you actually get together?
I met Reb during that time when Beau Hill was giving us gigs, but Reb was also another session guy. But when I say session, I just mean, stray dogs off the street that could play. I knew Beau since I was 16 and followed him to New York. So, and Reb was from Pittsburgh who had moved to New York. And there's a guitar player named Bobby Massano, who's a blues guitar player that kind of introduced Reb to that whole scene. And Reb was the super hotshot, very unique sound, incredibly talented. And him and I met each other, and it was like Beau was the one who suggested that him and I write songs, And then we worked a little bit, and then I took the Alice Cooper job, and I met Paul Taylor. And I knew that those two would be great for the front lineup of a band,
and the rest is history. Yeah. So
we met Rod Morgenstein quite a bit later after we were making demos on our first album. But Rod was a unique choice coming out of the Dixie Dregs, and he gave us a little bit of a twist. So there was a twist of credibility going on there. And yeah, I mean, look, we put our first record out, and we were very close to getting dropped because it didn't really sell. And same story as a lot of bands, and then MTV kind of took off. So that's interesting. So in hindsight, we view that first self-titled debut album Winger in '88 as a huge success. Because it has hits, 17, Headed for Heartbreak. Has all these hits in hindsight. But you're saying initially, it wasn't getting much radio play, and you credit MTV, VH1, you credit those channels with helping break it. I credit directly a guy named Rick Krim, who was working at MTV. He ended up becoming the programming director, very powerful guy now, but back then he was basically low man on the totem pole, but he was a huge Dixie Dregs fan, and Rod, played him our demo, and he said, let me try to get this on Headbangers Ball. And then there was a guy named God, what was it? Tom Hunter was the programming director of MTV. And I had met Tom, and Tom was from Denver. So we had that. And between those two guys, particularly Rick Krim, who really was behind us to help us get on there, they got it on there. Headbangers Ball, and then we just had all our friends call in, to try to get in the top 10.
That's awesome. Well,
it was total guerrilla warfare back then.
Well, I'm glad you had an advocate sort of behind enemy lines, to use your analogy, advocating for you on MTV. That's great.
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. I mean, I don't know how bands do it now. It's quite amazing to me. I'm quite the dinosaur. Very lucky to have gotten in before social media and have a big enough following to survive. But oftentimes young artists will say, "What do I do, man? What should I do?" And I'm like, I'm clueless. I mean, I really don't know.
The entire game has changed. Like whatever advice you gave them for back then, and it's completely different now with all the streaming services and social media and like Spotify's and Pandora's. And I mean, it's a whole different game.
Yeah.
Well, I would love to. Well, thanks for taking me sort of the behind the scenes of who helped push that first album, into our ears and onto our TV screens. But I would love to, at least musically, I would love to do like a deep dive on. Let's do "Headed for a Heartbreak" because I know 17 was a co-write, but I think "Headed for a Heartbreak" was just you solo writing it, right? So do you remember when you came up with it? Do you remember where you were when you penned that one?
Oh yeah. We were writing the first record in a high rise on 28th and Park in New York City. That a friend of mine at the time, a Japanese friend named Eiichi Naito, who was part of this company called Amuse America, loaned us his studio and was thinking about maybe managing us. And so he was very generous and let us use the studio. And he had a little recording room, and so we would go in there at night after they were all done and write. And I just sat down. A lot of times, many artists will tell you this. I don't feel like I'm any different. Artists in general, a lot of the best ideas come by accident, subconsciously. You just put your hands on the keyboard or the guitar and like something awesome happens right out of the blue. I mean, you never can try to sit down and go, I'm going to write an awesome idea today. It's always something that comes in when you're not paying attention, that the universe, kind of channels into you. And I would guarantee you that any artist would tell you the same thing. So,
I've always thought the song ideas are kind of out there in the universe, like existing on their own, and then like certain people are just lucky enough to like be the vessel for it. You know what I mean? Some people think it's the other way around, like we're creating and putting it out, but I don't know. I've always thought it was kind of the opposite. Like if you're in the right place, right time, and you're lucky enough, then you get to grab it, but it's already sort of out there, I think.
It is, and anybody that tells you that it's not is probably like a self-aggrandizing egomaniac, because the better you are at it, and the luckier you are to be struck with great ideas that sound inevitable. It's always the ones that sound inevitable that make you understand that these ideas are floating out there. And then it's up to you to turn them into something and then return them to the universe. But the origin of all of this art that we do is, it's in a big collective infinite intelligence. I mean, there's no other way to see it.
I like how you worded that. Send it back out. So it's you return it to which it came from. So you're a household name literally because you're in MTV, beaming it into our households, our living rooms, after the first one. So when you do that second album, was there pressure to follow up, or were you guys like motivated, like jacked up, adrenaline, like, all right, now we got this? And are you really just feeling it? Like, was Miles Away floating away and easier to grab? Like, do you think you were in the flow of it?
Well, both were existing. We were under a lot of pressure and we were also on fire. So Miles Away was actually a song by Paul Taylor, who wrote that song years before even our first album came out. I did a demo of Miles Away with Paul, who wrote the song. I didn't have anything to do with it.
Yeah.
Years before that, and it was obvious that it was going to be a hit, but it was more in like the Journey kind of vibe, that whole world, because Paul comes from Northern California and was kind of in that whole world.
The lights were going down on his Cite. It was a little different.
Yeah, exactly. The second album is a weird album. We weren't ready for it, if I was to be perfectly honest. We delivered the record without Easy Come, Easy Go and Can't Get Enough. And the record company was basically like, the only hit on here is Miles Away. So maybe you should go back and, try to come up with a hit. Because that's back in the day when the record company dictated to you whether they were going to release your album or not.
Right.
And so we went back in and wrote Can't Get Enough, which I like Can't Get Enough. I'm not crazy about Easy Come, Easy Go, but that was just a high pressure situation. That would be in the category of places in my career that I would have done differently had I had a chance to go back and do that again. But then
thanks for being candid about that, by the way. Not many people talk about their, misfires or their druthers or what they'd rather do. So I appreciate you giving the pros and the cons and all that.
Oh, well, yeah, listen, you have to admit when you suck. You have to understand that it's just a process. You make decisions at the time when you think you're armed with the best info, and then you look back. Sometimes you hit it, and sometimes you miss, man. The third record, Pull, is arguably our best album. And on that record, we hit it 100% all the way around. Songwriting, production, everything. And unfortunately, it came out at the height of the grunge onslaught. So even saying that, we still went gold, which by today's standard would be a miracle. But
oh yeah. So wait, are you saying that like that genre you guys were rock? I guess what in hindsight on the infomercials with the scrolling text, Winger, Warrant. I guess what would you call that era? What, like power ballad, hair metal? Or you're saying that was on the way out, whereas grunge was kind of coming in.
It was completely out. I mean, but the second Smells Like Teen Spirit happened, all those bands were history. I mean, even the biggest of them, Bon Jovi and all that, were suffering from that. But that era has really stood the test of time, and you don't see many grunge bands out there like you do all the 80s bands. I mean, Jerry Cantrell does stuff, but sadly, a lot of the lead singers from the three best of the bands are dead. That's a tragic scenario.
I feel like the fashion of grunge has stayed, but sadly, a lot of the leaders died, unfortunately. Now the music lives on; people love the music, but but there is like an affinity for your stuff. Merriweather Post does an M3 Rock Festival every year, where it's like Night Ranger. You guys have probably played that. Kicks always play, so there is like a nostalgia for it, for sure.
It's not just a nostalgia, dude. Like we play in our shows, like half the audience is 30 and under. I mean,
that's awesome. Now, do you think they just listen with their parents, or do you think it's the music itself that they're just vibing with it on its own?
Both. I think some parents turn their kids onto the music and they ended up loving it. Some people discover the music. A lot of, if you look on Instagram, the metric to understand this is guitar heroes. Because if you look at all the guitar heroes, they're the ones with the most followers, because there's a lot of young kids out there that want to be shredders. And that era produced more amazing shredders than any other era from what I can see. Well, I'm talking about people like Richie Kotzen, John Five, Andy Timmons, Steve Vai, John Petrucci. These people go on Instagram and kids follow that. People want to learn how to do that, and these guys have million plus followers.
Crazy.
And if you look at drummers from the era, you won't see anything near that, or singers, or especially bass players. But I mean, it's a guitar hero-driven genre for the most part, and songs. Def Leppard is king. I mean, they have more hits than anybody and better songs, actually, in my opinion. And they continue to play stadiums. So, hey.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, it's interesting to me that you were saying that you thought by the time you did Pull, that you thought that was when you were really like firing on all cylinders and arguably your best album. So then if that's the case, why did the band break up temporarily right after that? I know you reunited in 2006 for like 4 more albums and you're still playing today, but like why do you think there was that temporary period? If you had just done your best stuff, why did you leave? Was it just to go solo in New Mexico for a while, or what was it?
Because the record company dropped us. Nobody would book us. The name was totally toxic. And we couldn't play a club with 10 people in it.
Really? Just the name Winger? But they were ready for Nirvana, Pearl Jam, Stone Temple Pilots, all of that. Green Day was coming in. Like, just those bands, with them taking over, the name Winger just was, they thought was toxic to book you at that point?
Well, I was singled out on Beavis and Butthead, so for us it was a little bit worse, but it wasn't just us. It was Warrant and Bon Jovi, and not so much Bon Jovi. I remember seeing Bon Jovi in Miami in like 91 or 92, and he was like, man, it's rough out there. But rough for Bon Jovi was, half an arena, But,
yeah, it's graded on a curve a little.
But I mean, coming off 2 or 3 night sellouts, I mean, that's but it was us and Skid Row and, all the bands like us that, Rat, and it was like you're gone overnight. And so there was no point in staying together,
Yeah, I gotta tell our listeners the Beavis and Butthead reference was remember they famously wore AC/DC and Metallica, I think, but then yours was like Stuart Stevenson had a Winger shirt or something, right? So that was that era. But I'm glad you're still, the proof is in the pudding, though. You have the longevity. You're still playing. You're still touring. You're doing Tally Ho Theater this Friday. And like you're saying, the followers on social media. So how do you think that you endured as a band that rough patch to be able to bounce back, reunite the band, do all these albums, and still tour? And now you have a whole new generation coming to your shows. Like, how do you think you got through that rough patch where you didn't change, but the music industry changed? But how do you think you overcame it? And did you just outlast it? You just do it long enough and you bypass that?
Yeah, you just keep swinging, dude. And I've got better musicians in my band than most people, and we're original members. I mean,
right.
When I say better musicians, I probably shouldn't say it in that way. What I should say is the guys in my band are of the highest order of musicians. I mean, Reb Beach, Rod Morgenstein, I mean, come on. And we're very good friends, and we enjoy playing together. And we, like I say, it's all original members. I can still sing. We have a great agent, and I don't know if you know this, but I have a whole other career in classical writing and composition. So I spend a lot of time now doing that, where right now I'm making an album with the Nashville Symphony and straight up legit classical. So
really?
Oh yeah. They're doing my violin concerto in May. And the point is that, to answer your question, I always focused on the music. That was always the answer. It's like, forget about all the surrounding noise and just focus on being a better musician and, a good self-critic and self-editor, and never let the shit go to your head.
I love that attitude. Well, final seconds here, because you mentioned you doing the classical stuff and, with the Nashville Symphony, which is awesome to me. Didn't you also do a couple years ago, you dabbled in a little like musical theater music? Like you did a Jack the Ripper musical, Get Jack. Where did that just ultimately become a concept album, or is there still an idea to bring it to Broadway or the stage?
That's an ongoing thing that is very difficult. It's been very difficult to get up and running. The album came out probably 5 years ago, and so the music's out there, and that's continually a work in progress. That's a difficult genre. I like working in that genre a lot, actually. So there'll probably be more of that to come.
Different, and also the timing. You had the whole pandemic hit the following year after, so the timing didn't really help at all.
Yeah, right.
And it's just that's a difficult beast to try to tame anyway, to get something up on Broadway. So, well, best of luck. I'd love to see it one day. If you get, like you said, just keep plugging away. You're nothing if not persistent, man.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Everyone, check out Winger at Tally Ho Theater in Leesburg, Virginia this Friday. Get your tickets, everybody. Thanks, Kip. Appreciate you.
You too, man. Have a good one.
Thanks so much for listening to Beyond the Fame with Jason Fraley. Our theme music is Scott Buckley's Clarion. Remember to give us a 5-star rating if you like what you hear. We'll see you next time.